Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is January 21st, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. Title of today's podcast is Impeachment, Coronavirus, and Davos. So there's a lot to discuss. We talked on Sunday in the Week Ahead segment that this was going to be a wild week. We discussed last week that we were going to be in the midst of some wild weeks ahead. The impeachment, of course, was going to be front and center. We have central banks coming out making their statements, their decision-making process in regards to interest rate policy. The Federal Reserve will be meeting next week on that decision. We have Davos taking place, which is a town over there in Switzerland. This is where the elite of the elite, politicians, financial economists, everybody, you name it. You watch the financial media, it's going to be plastered with Davos. It's basically a World Economic Forum, roundtable discussions. What do all of these money managers think? What do all of these world leaders think? Where are the markets headed? What do we have to do with this crisis? Is there going to be a crisis? How are we going to handle it? So this is an annual event. We'll discuss a little bit about that as well. But before I get into the impeachment, I just want to talk about real quickly here a little bit more news. I'm sure many of you are aware in regards to Boeing. Boeing, of course, has been front and center in regards to the 737 MAX 8 airliner. Now Boeing is reaching out to banks, attempting to raise $10 billion. This is going to be debt, so this is even more debt. $10 billion. Is that enough? Probably not. There is also word out there that the 737 MAX is not going to be operational until at least the second quarter of this year, which is exactly what we said would be the minimum months ago. You know, I told you my spider senses were ticking on this one. Something didn't seem right to me from the outset, and here we are. Recall, folks, it wasn't that long ago where Boeing was thinking, oh, well, maybe by the end of 2019 we'll be operational again. Nope. Got to kick that can further down the road. There's no way that federal regulatory agencies are going to rush this. There's just no way. This is not an iPhone. This is not a laptop. Lives are literally in the balance. Because if it's found that the FAA or some other government agency was faulty, or they rushed their decision-making process, who do you think Boeing's going to go after they get sued again, if that's what takes place, if they do a rush job on this? Boeing's going to go after the federal government. They're going to go after these agencies. It's going to be everybody would be responsible if there is another rush job. The ironic thing here, Boeing is trying to get $10 billion in debt. Well, my goodness. Perhaps if they were not involved, like everybody else and their mother on Wall Street in corporate America, buying up their shares, maybe they would have $10 billion in cash, and they wouldn't have to go out and raise more debt. What an idea. This could be known as the Great Unraveling, and I imagine it will happen. Not just with Boeing, but across the spectrum. The majority of this run-up, this great economy, this great stock market that we allegedly have, is from share buybacks and Federal Reserve and other central bank liquidity injections, which is virtually one and the same. It's financial engineering. It is not organic growth. And now you have shares at all-time highs. So now these corporations, if they continue to go on their buyback shopping spree, they're now buying their shares, retiring their own shares at all-time highs. What could possibly go wrong there? Perhaps also, if Boeing and other companies weren't so inclined to engage in financial engineering, and instead use that cash that they generated through their operations to actually dot the I's and cross the T's, maybe we wouldn't be having these issues surrounding Boeing. I honestly believe that if this issue with Boeing gets worse, this can be a catalyst like Lehman Brothers a decade ago. Because this will have huge ripple effects in the manufacturing and industrial economy here in the United States. And don't forget about General Electric either, with the allegations from forensic accountant Harry Markopoulos and his firm alleging financial and accounting fraud in GE that has been rampant for years. And do not forget that GE manufactures engines for the airliners. So this is big. A lot of the interconnectedness here. Make no mistake about it. Now, what's ironic here with these two companies, they're very much front and center when it comes to the military-industrial complex. If this gets worse, might we turn up the heat in the Middle East once again? When all else fails, take them to war. Well, if Boeing can no longer sell commercial airliners at a record pace, or a pace in which it can sustain itself, well, then maybe they can start making weapons of war. Wouldn't that be fantastic? I'm not joking about that either. I'm serious. They are front and center when it comes to the military-industrial complex. If this company goes down, it will bring the stock market with it. It will bring a lot of the industrial manufacturing base in this country down with it. Do you think Thunder Thumbs is going to tolerate that? I mean, how else are you going to do it? You're going to bail them out behind the scenes? You're going to use taxpayer dollars? How great is that going to be? How politically convenient is that going to be? So much for draining the swamp if that's what happens. Is the Federal Reserve going to bail them out behind the scenes? Well, that would just be fantastic too, wouldn't it? Or would we go to war? None of these options are good. Not a one. Well, free market response would be, well, let them restructure. Let them do what they got to do. Come out and confess, because it's going to come out sooner or later, especially if this gets worse. Gets pushed back to the third quarter, then the fourth quarter. How many more lawsuits are going to be levied and launched against Boeing? This is a front and center story, folks. Pay attention. Now to the impeachment front. For those of you who were paying attention, and I hope you were, because this is an historic event. Not necessarily a good one. It's never good when the President of the United States is being impeached, but, given the facts and evidence, the testimony that we know thus far, it's not looking good for Donald J. Trump. It's not looking good at all. And we've done quite a bit of analysis on this podcast, especially when we were in the heat of the moment of all of that impeachment inquiry. Now we are moving to the trial phase in the United States Senate. Of course, this entire thing is a political process. Make no mistake about it. That is what it is by design. It is political. This is not a criminal trial. Yesterday, I know I did not do a podcast, but a lot of the news that was circulating yesterday and in the early hours today prior to the commencement of the proceedings in the U.S. Senate was how Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader on the Senate side, was proposing rules of how the Senate would proceed. And that both sides, the House side and the Democrats, their managers, and the defense team representing Donald Trump, would have 24 hours each to make their case, but they had to do so over a period of 2 days each. So 12-hour sessions, assuming that there would be no breaks, which of course there's going to be breaks for lunch, a bathroom break, stretch your legs, dinner, all that type of stuff. And who knows if other amendments are going to be put forward and if there is going to be additional votes taking place, yada, yada, yada. The U.S. Senate is supposed to get together at 1 p.m., so 12 hours straight would be 1 a.m. So most of the country would not be a witness to the trial. Well, that's not good. That's not good at all. So the question now becomes, was that a little bit of political engineering, Was that Mitch McConnell being a little Machiavellian? Is there a little bit of strategy in that? Because today, you now have actual handwritten amendments and changes to the rules that have been submitted. And instead of it being over 2 days, each side would now have 3 days, which of course is a lot better for the public, a lot better for the Senate, and everybody else. So, was that Mitch McConnell playing politics? Was he trying to look strong for the president? Yeah, we're just going to ram this thing through. We're going to rush it through. Or was he giving a little bit of cover to some of those moderate Republicans who could come to the front and now look strong because they're opposing Mitch McConnell? No, we can't tolerate this. We have to do it at least over 3 days. In the Clinton case 20 years ago, it was over 4 days. So now it's going to be over 3 for each side, if they want to use that much time. So it's better. I'll give them that. Most of today, this was not opening arguments for both sides. This was amendments to the rules, how things would be proceeding. But I have to say, if you were an impartial juror, which we're all supposed to be, and you watched and listened to both sides, I think hands down, the Democrats were the more persuasive side. They were the more prepared side. And a lot of people, you watch the pundits on Fox, on MSNBC, on CNN, and I hope you're flipping through the stations and getting a little bit of everybody here, people, because you have to. You have to. Oh, well, the Democrats, they're just making the same statements, the same thing over and over and over again. It's just the same stuff. That might be true, and it might be irritating to the people who have been paying attention to this for months because they're political junkies, they're news junkies, they're in the Beltway, they're paying attention. That's probably not the case for your average Joe American, who may not have paid too much attention to the impeachment inquiry aspect of it, but now, well, it's actually a trial. The president has officially and formally been impeached. Now we're in the trial phase. Maybe now they're going to start tuning in and paying attention. So what might be old news to a lot of political junkies and news junkies out there, it might not be old news to the average Joe American. And that's what this is really about. That's who has to understand what is going on here. Because the Democrats came out, and I have to say, calm, cool, and collected. I am not a Democrat. I'm a libertarian. And I am no fan of Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, both of those gentlemen in particular. Believe me when I tell you. So when I make further comments, it's going to pain me that I have to come almost to their side to defend them. But what I'm really doing is defending the truth. They just happen to be the side that happens to be speaking it at this moment. But when you look at both sides, the Democrats were far more calm, cool, and collected. They had slides. They had their presentation put together. They had video. They had audio. They had text messages. They had email statements. They had historical precedent for previous impeachments, not just impeachments of U.S. presidents, but of other members of the government who are capable of being impeached. None of this was refuted by the president's team. None of it. They got up there, and most of their arguments were short and brief. There is nothing wrong with a short and brief. Sometimes less is more. But in this instance, not the case as far as I'm concerned. They seemed rattled. They were ill-prepared as far as I'm concerned. There was a point in time when Jay Sekulow, who was one of the personal attorneys to Donald Trump, was up there making an argument. And I literally laughed out loud at his argument. I said, what the hell is he saying? This makes no sense whatsoever. It has something to do with lawsuits. And it's a constitutional outrage that such things be even stated in this chamber. Oh my goodness, the moral outrage. I laughed. And then the cameras pulled back and you could actually see the House managers, the Democrats, chuckling as well. And then Adam Schiff gets up and he says, I don't even know what Jay Sekulow is talking about. And I'm like, me neither. Me neither. But he's screaming really loud. And he's pounding the desk. So it must mean something. When you can't argue the facts, you argue the law. When you can't argue the law, you argue the facts when you can argue neither, you pound the table. And that's what we've been seeing from the Republicans on the House side, and now we're seeing it from the president's legal team. Now, I hope they are more prepared in the coming days and weeks ahead with an argument for their client. I really do. I really do, because today was not a good showing for the Republicans and for the president and his team at all. Not even close. Were there a couple arguments that could have held water? Yeah, there were some things, there were some good jabs. But most of the points were the same old, same old. Not arguing the facts, not arguing the law, arguing process. That this was a hit job, this was a con job, it was the Democrats, it's all they've wanted since the election night back in 2016. That is not arguing the facts of the case. That is not arguing the witnesses that have thus far come forward. It's not arguing the charges against the President of the United States, which, remember, are an abuse of power and an obstruction of Congress. Now, what we know is there is an existing precedent that exists within the Department of Justice that states that a sitting president cannot be indicted. Okay, we know this. We analyzed this months ago in regards to the Bob Mueller investigation. Bob Mueller himself stated, we knew from the outset of our investigation, that we would not be indicting the President of the United States given the precedent that exists within the Justice Department. So basically punting to Congress if they want to proceed with impeachment. Now we're going to have, most likely, Alan Dershowitz, an attorney for the president, although he is distancing himself from the president and saying, no, I'm not here, I'm not on the defense team, I'm here to defend the Constitution. Talk about doublespeak and lawyers, why nobody likes him. He's allegedly supposed to come out and make the argument that a president of the United States cannot be impeached for an abuse of power. So let me get this straight. Let me understand this. You got a precedent that exists within the Justice Department that says a sitting president cannot be indicted. And now the president's legal team is going to be arguing that he cannot be impeached for an abuse of powers article. So he's above the law. Give him a crown. Shut down the Capitol. Congress has no meaning. It has no purpose. That's what they are in effect arguing here, ladies and gentlemen, and they are doing it right in your face. High crimes and misdemeanors is by definition an abuse of power. What remedy then do the people have for an out-of-control executive, whether it's Donald Trump or any other president for that matter? This is larger than the man. This is our Constitution at stake. Because that's the argument. He could commit a crime, but the Justice Department isn't going to indict him so long as he is the sitting president. Now, his legal team is saying, even if he abuses his power, it's not an impeachable offense. So what's the remedy? What can the people do to rectify this? If there is an executive, a president of the United States who is abusing his or her power, what's the remedy? We have to sit there and wait until the next election? In this case, we can do that. What happens if it's his next term? What's the remedy then? Well, according to his legal team, there is none. He can do whatever he wants. Wow, I wonder who else said that. The president did. The president did, and that was one of the things that the Democrats showcased on multiple occasions throughout today. That statement by the president, Article 2 of the Constitution, I can do whatever I want. No, you can't, Mr. President. No, you cannot. That is exactly why the Constitution of the United States exists. The very fact that that thought and those words came out of that man's mouth is, it's beyond words. It's beyond words. Somebody who is truly worthy of that office should never even think such a thing, let alone utter it. Maybe it's a good thing that he actually said it because now we know what he thinks. He thinks he can do whatever he wants. And now he's put together a legal team that is going to argue that on his behalf. Because if he can abuse his power of office and commit a crime and not be indicted for it, at least while he's a sitting president, then he can get away with whatever he wants. That is not what the Constitution of the United States was created to protect we the people from. Or to allow that to happen. That's why it was created, I should say. That's why the U.S. Constitution was set up the way that it is. To protect us from a monarch, a king, a tyrant, who believes that they are above the law, who believes that they can abuse their power. And they do. And they get away with it. Because there's no accountability. So these are going to be the arguments that are going to be coming forward over the next couple of days, couple of weeks here. This is serious stuff. What Donald Trump's team continued to argue was that the Ukrainians got the aid. At the end of the day, they got the aid. That's correct, they did. But when? You identified the what. The what is the aid. They got the what. When did they get it? Before or after the whistleblower came forward? Oh, that's right, after. After. There's a timeline to take into consideration here, folks. A serious timeline to take into consideration. And don't forget, Ambassador Sondland, his phone call with the president. Remember this? I want no quid pro quo, no quid pro quo. Well, why would he even say that in the first place? Who was alleging that there was a quid pro quo? So why would the president even say that? If everything was perfect, if everything was being done properly, why would he even think to even say that? But he did. And remember, that was not a defense or an argument that the president was putting forward before Ambassador Sondland's testimony. He came out with that defense during that day. Remember, he went out, spoke with the Washington, D.C., the White House reporters outside the White House. He had that piece of paper with him, with the quote, his quote allegedly, I want no quid pro quo. I want Zelensky to do the right thing. That's it. Hangs up. And remember, folks, Ambassador Sondland, during that same testimony, said, I cannot be 100% certain as to the date of that phone call. And gee, I wonder why that is. Well, he told us why. Because the State Department and the White House were not turning over any documents, even some of Ambassador Sondland's documents. So, ironically, this could actually be something to Donald Trump's favor. Perhaps Ambassador Sondland got his dates mixed up, and it can be shown through a document that Donald Trump made this comment before the whistleblower was made aware to the public and to the president. Because remember, folks, the president was allegedly aware of the whistleblower complaint prior to the knowledge of it becoming public. It's important to remember. The timeline is always important to remember. So if Donald Trump had this phone call with Ambassador Sondland prior to any knowledge of a whistleblower, well, then that might be some evidence in his favor. But I doubt that's going to be the case, because why even bring up the words quid pro quo to begin with? The Republicans want to argue that the president was concerned about corruption. Well, that's ridiculous on its face. Even in the transcript that he tells us to read all of the time, and also tweeted out today again to read the transcript, there is no mention of corruption at all. It's about looking into Burisma, and it's about looking into the Bidens. That's what it's about. If the president was so concerned with corruption and being a good steward of U.S. taxpayer dollars, then perhaps he would have held up the aid in 2017. He did not. Perhaps he would have held up the aid in 2018. He did not. 2019 rolls around. You have a new incoming president, President Zelensky. Our U.S. agencies, various U.S. agencies, declare that Zelensky is legit. He's the real deal. He is going to be a corruption fighter. We can work with him. He will make an excellent ally for the United States. Nah, I don't know about that. Now, I don't know. I'm hearing some things from other people. I don't know if he's good or not. Who are these other people? Rudy Giuliani left Parnas, and who knows who else was running around on their behalf. Who knows? And also, Joe Biden is now running for president of the United States of America. No problems in 2017, no problems in 2018. Now, all of a sudden, 2019 rolls around. Oh, we got a problem. We got to hold this up. This makes it look extremely political, ladies and gentlemen. That means it becomes an abuse of power. Because holding this up to start an investigation, or at least the announcement of an investigation into Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden, is not advantageous to the American people, is it? If it was so advantageous to the American people, why was an investigation not opened in 2017 or 2018? But it's most definitely advantageous to President Trump. Would it have been advantageous to President Trump in 17 and 18? Most definitely is now, isn't it? And when you have the testimony after testimony after testimony of various government officials, some even within the White House itself, saying that this was politically motivated, it causes problems and it causes concern. It's all the Republicans have. It's all his defense team seems to have. Let's argue the process. Some occasions they even made stuff up. Some occasions they were talking about things that I have no idea what they were even discussing. And then they go back to make the same arguments that were made by Republicans in the House of Representatives, which was a continuation of moving the goalpost when it was convenient for them to do so. Almost every charge that was made during today's trial, and it's continuing as far as I know, even as I do this late in the evening, every charge that the president's defense team made on his behalf was pretty much struck down immediately by the counter-argument of one of the Democrat House managers. And again, I take no pleasure in having to come to the support of Adam Schiff and some of these other Democrats. But they're the ones who have been speaking the truth today. I know this. This audience should know this because we went through the documents. I don't just listen to Donald Trump and Thunder Thumbs on his Twitter account. That's with things political. That's with things economics. I don't just listen to some Twitter feed from somebody who has a stake in arguing whatever it is they're arguing. If you want to follow the leader like that, well, then I guess you're fine with the president abusing his power. It is our job. You know, I've been saying here with this process, or the Senate and the House and all of it, that it is a solemn and moral obligation of these senators to ensure that they do administer impartial justice and that they allow for a fair and open and transparent trial. It's also a solemn and moral obligation for us, the people, to hold our government to account. Not to allow them to say whatever they want and allow them to get away with whatever they want. Don't just read the headlines and say, oh, yeah, that must be it. Yeah. Don't just read a Twitter feed and say, oh, yeah, that must be it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's what he told me. The president couldn't lie to me. No way, no how. My government never lies to me. Are you ridiculous? If you think your government never lies to you, you're either drunk, high, medicated, need to be medicated, or somebody's got to call the paddy wagon because you are not paying attention. And most of you probably have a smartphone. You pretty much have the world at your fingertips, as they like to say. So stop playing the games and maybe educate yourself on something. It might do you a world of wonder. So there's no question that this is a political process. It will continue to be a political process. Again, most of the arguments today were in regards to amendments being proposed, most of them being tabled, which just means they're being put aside. Possibly they will be back up for votes at a later date. That remains to be seen. But the Democrats were definitely the more prepared side. There's no debating this. If you're an impartial juror in this, if you're calling balls and strikes, there's no question. The body language, again, the Democrats were calm, cool, and collected. Donald Trump's team looked agitated. Pam Bondi was up there one time for about 5 minutes, which again is fine. I have no problem with brevity. But I think she thought she was on Fox News as opposed to the floor of the U.S. Senate. She looked agitated. She was flipping her hair. Seriously, that's the best you can do. And then her argument didn't hold much water either. Again, it was a continuation of arguing against process. You might as well just have President Trump down there. Unbelievable. It really was unbelievable. He's the president of the United States and allegedly some type of multi-billionaire. And this is the best legal team he could put together. This is how prepared or ill-prepared they were for these statements, for these arguments. I hope they do a much better job in the coming days. Because the president deserves it, and so do the American people. That was ridiculous. I mean, it was a terrible performance. I can't even explain to you how shocked I am with how poor their performance was. One after the other. I almost knew what Adam Schiff or one of the other Democrats was going to say. Why? Because I read the documents. I listened to the testimony. And what the Trump defense team was putting forward was not what the facts and evidence are. So, no, that's not right. It was this. And that's why you don't just listen to a Twitter feed. You don't just listen to the president in front of the press corps. You read the documents, and that's why I take the time in this podcast to go through as many documents as I possibly can. So I hope you understand why I do that. Because these are the games that are going to be played, and they're going to be played by both sides. So get off of that one too. I mean, we could show clip after clip after clip, and they all do it. What the Republicans said 20 years ago versus what they're saying today, what the Democrats said 20 years ago versus what they're saying today. Wow. Politicians are hypocrites. Shocker. Breaking news. Wake up. Let the truth be known, and may justice be served. That's all we're asking for here. If there's evidence that comes out from a witness, from documents, from a combination of both, that exonerates the president, so be it. We'll be happy. We want the truth. But if the president is going to continue to stonewall and not allow for witnesses to come forward or for documents to be released, that seems a lot more like what a king or a queen would do, or a dictator would do. That's not what the President of the United States does. And this, again, this is not a criminal case. It's a political one. And so the President has a moral obligation, as far as I'm concerned, to release these documents for the truth of the matter. Because if he is truly innocent and there is exculpatory evidence, then the American people need to know, because this country, we are at each other's throats. It is divisive. The rhetoric from both sides, including the president, it's got to stop. But it isn't. If he could put a death knell in this with exculpatory evidence, he should have released it. He should have released it months ago, but he hasn't done so. So what's he waiting for? Is he waiting for his TV ratings, which is pathetic, if that's the case? Or is he hiding something, which is pathetic and dangerous? So we'll see what happens. There's many days, perhaps weeks ahead. There's going to be a lot of politicking taking place. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. A lot of horse trading behind the scenes. It's Washington, D.C. It's politics. Don't be surprised. Am I expecting any type of bombshell? Most likely not. Most likely this will just be rubber stamped. It'll come down to a party vote, and the president will be acquitted, despite the fact that, as far as I'm concerned, the evidence is quite damning that the president abused his trust of the American people by abusing the power of his office, by looking for an easy way out, politically speaking, against Joe Biden. And don't forget, folks, and I mention this here from time to time, that interview with George Stephanopoulos, when George asked him outright in the Oval Office, pretty much in regards to the Mueller investigation, Mr. President, if a foreign country approached you with information, would you take it or would you turn it over to the FBI? I'd take it. Well, maybe I'd do both. It was a softball question from George Stephanopoulos, who I can assure you is no major fan of the president. He threw him a softball. Donald Trump has been screaming, witch hunt hoax, for 2 years, destroying my presidency. Can't get anything done. George asked him a simple question. Yeah, I think I'd take it. All he had to say was, George, are you kidding me? Have you seen what they put me through? Of course I'm not taking it. Of course I'm going to turn it over to the FBI. It's ridiculous. Furthermore, I don't need assistance from a foreign government to help me beat these lunatic Democrats. That's what he could have said, but he didn't. He said, yeah, I take it. Why? Because that's who he is. And that's what concerns me, above and beyond everything else. If he is acquitted, will he do it again? The answer in my mind is yes, he will. Because he will truly believe that he can do whatever he wants. Because he has his legal team telling him that. They are arguing that on his behalf. You can abuse your power, Mr. President, because you cannot be impeached. You can commit a crime because there's a precedent that exists within the Department of Justice that a sitting president cannot be indicted. He will think he is king. And the dangerous precedent that sets for future presidents? I mean, you think you're happy now, Republicans? Wait until a Democrat gets in and plays the same game. Is that what you want? I don't think so. The coronavirus. Obviously, some of you may be aware of this. I have not done a lot of research on this, but obviously it was making some of the headline news. Is this something to distract people? Is this going to be something that is serious? It's in multiple provinces within China. It's where it started. It is also in several countries, Asian countries predominantly. The first case has also been made known here in the United States in the state of Washington. It is a deadly virus. There have been multiple deaths. However, I do believe some of the symptoms are treatable. The question is this something that arose? Remember, you have all of the pork bellies and all that stuff. You have all the pigs, the swine flu. Is this a mutation from that? Is this something a little bit more nefarious? Is this something that the Chinese military has been working on? Are they testing this? What are they doing? This is speculation. We have no idea, but it's the timing of it is suspect. The market sold off on it. So here we go. Here's another headline that's going to manipulate the markets. Coronavirus. It's getting bad. Down it goes. Oh, it's contained. Markets will rally. I mean, here we go. Is that what it is? I don't know. Regardless, it's something that should be taken serious to some degree, and we hope that they do contain it. The World Health Organization is expected to make that determination as to whether or not this is something serious or whether it is contained. But you have very dense cities throughout China, millions and millions of people in single cities. And the Chinese government is claiming that there's only a few hundred cases of this, which it is. It does go from person to person. Contact, airborne, that type of thing. So it's not good. It's not good. But the fact that the Chinese government's saying only a few hundred, that sort of stretches credibility a little bit. I mean, I hope that's all it is. I hope it's as few people as possible. But in cities with millions and millions of people, to say that only a few hundred have come in contact with it, I'm not so certain about that. And I doubt the Chinese government on virtually everything they tell us. So this isn't going to be any different either. So we'll keep you posted on it, but look for the headlines. Educate yourself as much as possible. If you're traveling to China, you might reconsider. Check with the State Department, the CDC, all that stuff before you do any international travel. Now to Davos. Just a couple points, because I did not pay much attention to this either, but a couple headlines that came across that I just want to touch on. It's no surprise to us here, really. But now you have a lot of the elite saying that central banks, they might be causing bubbles. Really? Jinkies. Jinkies. Thelma said jinkies. Where have you been? They've been doing this for years. Now, all of a sudden, you're concerned? After you've made your billions of dollars for doing nothing other than holding on to financial assets? Ah, marvelous. You also have Ray Dalio, who we cite here on multiple occasions. Founder of one of the world's largest hedge fund, is saying now cash is trash. Cash is trash. It might be. It could be. I still think the U.S. dollar has another leg up. I really do. I think there's going to be some liquidity problems. It's going to push it higher. I think there's some debt problems, especially in the emerging markets that are going to demand dollars when this debt's coming due, and it is starting to come due in huge waves. So people are going to want paid, and they're going to want paid in U.S. dollars. So that's going to create a demand for those U.S. dollars. It could bid it up. You also have Donald Trump over there in Davos, and of course he is claiming he wants negative interest rates once again. He loves it. He wants that money. He thinks it's fantastic. Maybe he should ask some of those Japanese bankers over there and some of those European bankers and those politicians, hey, how's that working out for them? Not too good, Mr. President. I can assure you it's not, and it will not work out well here in the United States of America either. But he's the best president ever, overseeing the greatest economy ever. Again, if you just want to listen and follow Thunder Thumbs' Twitter account, you might be inclined to believe that. But if you look under the hood and just do a little bit of research, you're going to know that that's not the case. So central banks are creating bubbles. No surprise to this audience. And cash is trash. Time will tell. Dalio and some other major investors are also long gold as well, which is something we've been discussing here for quite a while. Gold and silver, precious metals. Get involved with them. Not the ETFs. I mean, you can if you want, maybe some of the gold stocks, the mining stocks, silver stocks, physical gold and silver bullion, coins, bars, that stuff. Be diversified, believe me. It'll be to your betterment in the long run. Are they going to continue to prime the press? Absolutely, that's what they do. That's the only tool they have. It's the only tool they have. That and lying to us. Those are the two tools that they have. And both are a fraud, because the one devalues your currency. It makes things more expensive. And the other is just an outright lie by people who are not held to account. There is no checks and balances when it comes to the Federal Reserve or any other central bank for that matter. You can elect a president. You can elect your congressman or woman, your senators. You can write them letters. You can storm their offices if they appoint somebody or they're affirming somebody that you don't like. You can do those types of things. People within the Federal Reserve, there's not a damn thing you can do. Until this country stands up in protest like the real leaders around the globe, who are the people who are sick and tired of dealing with what they have been dealing with for generations. And they are finally in the streets demanding change. That will come here. That will come here. Impeachment, the coronavirus, and Davos. We're just getting started. Thank you so much for joining me today, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure having you. As always, please like, share, subscribe, get the word out. We do love hearing from you. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Kreitis. Godspeed.